Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here on this monthly Zoom talk. My name is Danielle. I'm the network coordinator for IMNPN, the Indigenous Mentorship Network of the Pacific Northwest. And I am mixed of Guajajara, which is an indigenous community in Brazil, Brazilian and African diaspora ancestry. And I've been an uninvited visitor on the unceded territory of the Wasanich and Lekwungen speaking peoples, now referred to as Victoria, for about 2 years, and I'm very grateful to live and raise my family here. Now I would like to introduce you all to Caitlin Dick. She's with the BC NEAR.
Hello, everybody. Hi, Chika. Thank you for coming today. My name is Caitlin Dick. I am the admin assistant for the BC NEAR, and I am from Comox First Nation on my mother's side, and on my father's side, Dutch European ancestry. Super excited to be here today. I've been a grateful visitor on the Lekwungen speaking people's territory for 8 years now. I just wanted to go over a couple ground rules, I guess, here. I have everybody muted so that we can focus on the presentation. After the presentation, I will ensure that everybody can ask questions. So you can either raise your hand, there's a little button in the Zoom call here, or you can type it and then I can unmute you if you wish to ask it in person, or if you just want to have us read it out. I do have today's Zoom meeting, Zoom talk being recorded today. So if you're not comfortable with being recorded, I just suggest leaving your video off. And without further ado, I'll introduce Christina. Thank you.
Hello, Tansei, Tawau, welcome. Caitlin, if you wouldn't mind sending the link really quick to Lisa, as she had just sent an email saying that she's looking for the link that was registered. So Tansei meaning hi there, and Tawau meaning welcome. In Cree, I am really thankful and grateful to be here today to speak about Experiential Encounters, how Indigenous-led mentorship promotes Indigenous health research and leadership. As a Métis cisgender woman, a mother, wife, daughter, registered nurse with an undergraduate master's degree, doing my PhD in nursing right now, as a continual learner, I hold a lot of privilege. I hold a lot of intersections of privilege. And I want to acknowledge that as I often will cite Spider-Man's uncle, with great power comes great responsibility. I do believe that that is the case with regards to our intersections of privilege. The more we have intersections of privilege, the more we have a responsibility to speak up and use the gifts and the privileges that we have. I want to begin by acknowledging that today I am coming to you from the traditional unceded homelands of Coast Salish and Lekwungen peoples. The University of Victoria, where I study as a full-time PhD student and teach as a part-time assistant professor, is presently and continues to occupy these lands. And I'm really thankful to the Songhees, the Esquimalt and Wasanich nations, whose relationships with the land, not only as lip service, but as fully embodied ownership and stewardship of these lands, that relationship continues to this day. And so as an uninvited yet welcome visitor, I'm really thankful to local Indigenous folks who have taken time to share with me some of the local cultural protocols, teachings, and have taught me a lot. And so in being an uninvited visitor, I do commit to walking softly on these lands and really working to uphold local Indigenous peoples' rights to self-determination. And so just want to acknowledge that, and perhaps wherever you're tuning in from today, you might also consider your responsibilities, the privileges that you hold as well as the territory that you are on. Regarding Indigenous research, I love this quote. McGregor says, "Our story as researchers begins with the sources of our knowledge, not only those direct sources of our knowledge, that contribute to a current project, but also those individuals and life experiences that along the way have shaped who we are." So my situatedness, I am an implant or a visitor definitely here on Coast Salish territories, born and raised on Dene and Cree territory, a member of the Fort Smith Métis Local 50 and the NWT Métis Nation. On my father's side, I am 9th generation Scottish settler. And my father, Ian MacDonald, and his blended family of Driscolls and MacDonalds that grew up on the lands that are known as Prince Edward Island right now. And I'm thankful to have strong connections and family ties there. And on my mother's side, I have mixed ancestry. My grandmother was a first generation immigrant. She came by herself to Canada as a registered nurse midwife and met my grandfather, Ernest Villebrin. So I've got Mary Evans Villebrin and Ernest Villebrin on my mom's side. My grandfather is, and was rather, Dene and Cree Métis. He actually lost his Indigenous treaty status prior to Bill C-31 in 1985 because his mother, who was Dene and had treaty rights, married a Cree Métis man who did not have the same treaty rights. And that's a very contentious issue of legislated gender and blood quantum identities that has been going on since colonial contact in what's now known as Canada. After Bill C-31, my grandfather did regain his treaty status. And unfortunately, due to some of the intergenerational challenges that many folks experience, we didn't have a very strong relationship, but I'm also very thankful to have relationships with my cousins, aunties, uncles on my Villebrin side of the family and my Evans side of the family over in the UK. My mother's Marie MacDonald. My little sister Nadine is working in our home community as a social worker, and that's her in the middle. And my dad, Ian MacDonald, passed away several years ago. I'm also a mother, and I've got 3 children, Ian, Naya, and Evan. They inspire me, and a lot of what we, what I hope to do as I learn from Indigenous nurse mentors and both Indigenous and non-Indigenous researchers is to think forward and ahead to the next 7 generations. Is this concept that was new to me when I started doing the reading in the area of Indigenous research methodology, and sort of that the strength that comes and the resilience that is then celebrated when we can reorient Indigenous research in such a way that it is sort of owned and operated by Indigenous people, Indigenous communities with human rights to self-determination around health and well-being. And then also on this slide, there's a photo of my husband, Tendai Chakanyuka. I married into the Chakanyuka family. They're Indigenous to Zimbabwe, and Shona is the name of the group there. And so I'm really thankful to have his unique perspective and lived experience on my journey of coming to know myself and coming to know the world as I grow. And again, with lots of humility, will readily admit, and I hope you can too, that I am learning, always. Up in the top there, you can see Fort Smith, tiny little town that I grew up in. So suffice to say, growing up in a small town north of the 60th parallel, A lot of what happens in the great, wonderful, wild, spectacular, and awe-inspiring world of academia is a little bit foreign to me. And so I must say, I really am very thankful and grateful to mentors, to elders, and to advisors along the way who I've been able to meet. And so with that, I'd like to really honor the work that has brought me here today with Dr. Lisa Bourque Bearskin, who was granted a 5-year Indigenous nurse-led research plan funded by the CIHR and with partnership also with her home school, Thompson Rivers University School of Nursing, and with the blessing and welcomeness of being with the University of Victoria School of Nursing. I feel quite well supported in my location as a young / early aspiring academic, I suppose. So this, what brought me here today was actually, thankfully, I have 2 folks who are Indigenous academics on my PhD committee. One is Dr. Charlotte Lopi, who's been very engaged and involved with the Indigenous Mentorship Network of the Pacific Northwest, and the BC NEAR as a PI, and with Lisa, where her research is what has really brought me into the research scene of learning and experiencing while doing research and learning good ways. I also must share a shout out to Dr. Ann Bruce at the UVic School of Nursing, who's also on my committee and holds me in a space where it's very welcoming, and often I find her, as well as others, interpret things for me that at times don't necessarily come naturally. So with Dr. Lisa Bourque Bearskin's work, the main focus here, based on her PhD research, her work with Indigenous nursing knowledge, there is this quite inspiring plan for advancing Indigenous wellness by reconciling parallel pathways in Indigenous health nursing, innovating wise practices for education, standards, partnerships, and research. One of the things I've really been learning in my mentor-mentee relationship and sort of Indigenous academic family as well is that, you know, really as we advance more towards ownership and control or self-determination, and not just promising or best practices, but as Lisa will always say, wise practices, not just policies that might be somewhat stagnant at times, but again, wise practices. Some of the summary points here is this learning how to hold space and to, with great humility, co-create opportunities for optimizing scopes of practice aimed at improving Indigenous health, using Indigenous and non-Indigenous research paradigms, fostering Indigenous nursing leadership as drivers of Indigenous health research and knowledge translation, advancing Indigenous health equity research that focuses on rights, wellness, strength, and resilience of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples at the micro, meso, and macro levels, and championing Indigenous nurse-led community-based health research mentorship networks to develop capacity for Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. So with regards to leadership, mentorship, and training, one of the beautiful sort of ways of looking at and my role sort of within this Indigenous health nursing research team is looking at, as we consider what the potential for a refreshed understanding of what is Indigenous health nursing as a professional practice, complementing the role and efforts of Indigenous community-based health services and programs. I presently am sitting as an action research lead, but I'm also a nurse, and I'm also in a community of practice here with other Indigenous nurse scholars and community members. Again, thankful to the schools of nursing that I am supported with and by, as well as a research advisory team and a grandmother's council. So really honoring and looking to appreciate in my work, the work that has been done by grandmothers that hold nursing knowledge, both formally and informally, and to community members as well. To look at intergenerational mentorship, this is something that's really key, right from high school up to nursing studies and throughout a nursing career into retirement. It is quite an honor to have the opportunity to learn from folks like Madeline Dion Stout and Evelyn Voyager, Rose Miller, and June Shackley, to name a few, as well as to have sort of academic sister scholars and aunties. It's a different paradigm, a different way of looking at things, in my experience anyways, than in my more traditional nursing research classes, both quantitative and qualitative, within the traditional doctorate nursing education. So leadership, mentorship, and training is responsive to community requests in health research. Experiential learning opportunities are grounded in community. In this case, I feel like my community really is other Indigenous nurses and non-Indigenous nurses that support from a strength-based perspective, how to be not only involved in Indigenous health research, but to be also an ally and a sort of co-conspirator, as some might say, in doing Indigenous health research in a good way, and honoring and making space for Indigenous leadership and authentic community partnerships. Having peer support has been just a beautiful opportunity to be engaged both as a mentor and a mentee. I've been able to mentor through this program and through the IMNPN Indigenous undergraduate students in nursing, as well as to have peers and, as I say, academic aunties who are mentors to me that I look up to. One of the other things is critiquing critically and compassionately to co-create Indigenous health nursing across all ages, and within and throughout the discipline of nursing, I might add. And so the exemplar that I wish to share with you is a really unique opportunity, at least I think it is, based on what I know so far, as I'm coming to understand the academic, the traditional academic climate and culture, is experiential learning through doing. And so I was fortunate in my relationship with Lisa to be introduced to the Canadian Consortium for Neurodegeneration and Aging, otherwise known as the CCNA. Kids are home from school. If you hear some noise in the background, please just tune that out for now. But I appreciate that we're all online working and teaching and studying across the globe during the pandemic. And so I appreciate the understanding that comes with those who might have others in their households while doing this work. CCNA Team 18 focuses on Indigenous population health. It's led by Jennifer Walker at Laurentian University, as well as a team of others, Lisa Bourque Bearskin being one, Lindsay in University of Calgary, as well as Megan at University of Saskatchewan. So in one of the things as a new academic and trying to sort of find my place as well as my voice while gaining the necessary experience to be able to go forward and actually do research at the end of a doctorate degree is the opportunity again for that experiential and engaged research in a program of study, which I hope a lot of folks have access to. And today, so that's the experience I wanted to share, is that there has been a very, with this particular team under the leadership of Lisa, Megan, some of you who might be on the call, Juanita, Andrea, I think there's many others that have been mentioned as well in the, who are your academic mentors section for this gatherings. So in addition to the experience of supporting learning with and alongside both Indigenous and non-Indigenous researchers, I had the opportunity to complete, and we're in the process of still completing, but a cultural safety scoping review of reviews. And when I first started, I was given sort of the privilege of engaging in the work, but as a new academic, as a new researcher, I was sort of looking up the how-to as I went along, as I'm sure many of you who might be experienced researchers did very early in their career. What was really nice is to have the opportunity in a trainee role and as a mentored nurse researcher to work with a postdoctorate individual, Juanita, who's currently at University of Saskatchewan, and Andrea as well. With this work, we had the opportunity to not only engage in the process of doing a review of reviews, and for me, learning alongside folks that have the experience of having already done a lot of research, but also the opportunity for me to learn some of the somewhat foreign to me standards of what I'm now calling academic culture and currency. So for example, I didn't know that it was such a big deal who gets named as first author. And so thankfully, because the only things I've been able to the only things I've submitted for publishing so far have been with a team of Indigenous nurse scholars and academics and non-Indigenous allies, is that gently and preemptively that sort of currency piece was shared with me. And I'm not sure if everyone out there just knows because they know, and maybe it's common knowledge. For me, it was not. And then another sort of lesson that I learned through this work is that indeed, as a student, you may have first authorship, and historically speaking, I was surprised to learn that when you do your work as a researcher, sometimes someone else will come and take that first authorship spot in order to, sort of advance and increase your likelihood of being published. Again, foreign to me. However, one really wise practice that Jennifer Walker and Megan and Lisa Bourque Bearskin had worked together to sort of support is, if an Indigenous student is first author, their mentor as an Indigenous researcher who has the experience already may be the last author, with the asterisk that puts them as the corresponding author, as a way to honor that they are indeed in relationship together. And so that's a promising practice that I would strongly encourage for folks. First of all, translating and interpreting. What are some of these normative things that may be just common knowledge to folks that have been in academia for a while, or who have grown up in a situation where they weren't the first person in their family to get a degree, let alone pursue doctorate education. And so one of the other things is that because of the work with this particular group, I had, again, an opportunity to sort of bravely engage and imagine new ways to challenge what is sort of the traditional and present day academy that's quite Eurocentric or like dominated in certain ways of thinking about things. And so I would say through this experience, I was able to witness and embody firsthand the power of collaborative research partnerships that are increasingly inclusive, with humility, integrity, and authenticity that exemplify promising and wise practices towards the ongoing resurgence of Indigenous-led research and Indigenous-led health equity research that is supportive of rights to self-determination. And so, again, as I mentioned before, as a white-coated Métis cisgender nurse from a small town who happens to be a first-generation researcher and budding scholar, I am fortunate to be seeing and experiencing really encouraging and inspiring ways in which Indigenous scholars, researchers, and non-Indigenous allies in research do open spaces to remain authentically situated and to quote unquote do differently in research. It inspires me. It also gives me a lot of hope. It's easy to get overwhelmed with I can't name one academic that I've met who didn't at some point in their career, at some point in their graduate studies or doctorate studies, reference a feeling of imposter syndrome. But when you are from a minority group and you're in the academy, one of the things that can happen is that folks that perhaps have been there for a while, or perhaps hold various intersections of privilege, may not be aware of the added level of intellectual and emotional burden that is carried by quite often by Indigenous scholars, Indigenous community members. And I see it myself just in an observer role, reflected in who is leading the work, who is leading the work in healthcare, who is leading the work in education, et cetera, et cetera. And that ownership, if there is a way to sort of marry the process of reconciliation as a forever journey that allows safe space for Indigenous folks in research, as well as to encourage and promote wise practices in cultural humility that is grounded in anti-racism by non-Indigenous folks working in this together. There's a partnership there that can happen. And through working with the Indigenous Health Nursing Research Chair and Program, as well as working with the Canadian Consortium for Neurodegeneration and Aging, Team 18, and the Cultural Safety Protocol Writing Group. Not only is there authentic, welcoming space for both Indigenous and non-Indigenous voices collaboratively in the work, but also looking at other intersections, including and opening up space for ownership over other equity-seeking groups to hold that space for two-spirit folks, for men, for women, for LGBTQ two-spirit plus folks, for folks who don't speak English as a first language, for folks who have many different intersections, as we all do, to our identities and to our experience, lived and otherwise. That is where I really see the future. If we can authentically and respectfully engage with one another, there's an opportunity here. And so I do hope at some point, once the protocol is published. I wasn't sure how much, I could share from the other authors before being published, but what I will say is from the whole team, I am myself really thankful and very privileged to be learning in a trainee role. And I'm quite confident that moving forward, I will have gained a unique perspective and capacity to support other Indigenous researchers too, and non-Indigenous researchers as well, who are looking to respectfully engage in those the 1999 4 R's of Indigenous research as responsibility and reciprocity and right relationships with Indigenous communities that really, again, as I keep saying, my mentor Charlotte Lopi has said many times over, as have other Indigenous scholars in health research, is that self-determination really is, one of the key determinants of health and wellness. And so if we can support that not only in our practice, in our very many different disciplines that we come from, as well as in our research, in our policy making, in who makes policies, et cetera, then I think that is sort of the hope for the future with regards to honoring and respecting not only truth, but advancing towards reconciliation and research. So that's, I think, all my time for today. I will stop my screen share and get to see who's here now. Hello. And it is also my hope that if there's anyone who has any questions, thoughts, something on their heart, something that I've missed, please be just as patient and compassionate on me as I promise I will be to everyone who's doing this work here together in good heart and in good spirit, and respecting the connection of where we come from and our relationships with others. Thank you. And
Thank you so much, Christina. I really appreciated you taking us with you on your learning journey. It's so personalized, and I feel just whole hearing, all of your connections and the mentorship and kindness and relationships. That was a beautiful presentation. And as a aspiring early academic, someday when I'm ready to go back into the academic world, it's really nice to hear that everybody has really great strengths, weaknesses, and learning, and I'm just happy. So if anybody has any questions, you can either type it in the chat box. If I can see you on the screen, you can put your hand up, or you can put hands up. There's a button in Zoom. I just wanted to say thank you so much, Christina. That was beautiful. And I really appreciate your presentation, Heitschke.
Thank you, and Heitschke as well to you.
All right, you are unmuted, Lisa. Thank you.
That was wonderful, Christina. And, I think I'm very fortunate to be able to be part of your learning journey. And so I want to thank you for, being such a good student. One of my tough question to you is, what piece of this are you going to make your own for your PhD? And have you thought about that? And
Lovely. Thank
you
you.
could talk a little bit about that.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah. So there are a few things that through the journey of the last 2 years, I'm at the intersection of the halfway point. I'm just finishing up all my coursework and I'm heading off into comps and candidacy and all this good stuff that I hear is, I figure if you approach it with the spirit of it's going to be fun, hopefully it will be so. With regards to where I hope to carve out this, it's not even carving out, it's what I want to contribute to the discipline of nursing and to healthcare. As far as my PhD research, intentions. I'm very interested in how, based on my own experience as one of the community of practice folks engaged in this experience, is how intergenerational Indigenous nurse relationships and mentorships has an impact. I've noticed it, and I know that there have been a lot of support programs to increase, right now, for example, statistically speaking, Indigenous folks make up around 5 to 6% of the population in what is Canada, and yet we are less than 1% of nurses in Canada, and then most recently just under 3%, so still not proportionally represented. And I know in the past, and even in my undergraduate education, there have been a lot of programs, and there's been this growing body of knowledge. I think back to the Canadian Indigenous Nurses Association and some of the work that they've done with regards to mentorship and with regards to understandings. And I honor and respect the path, as I think I've kind of made clear, that's been like the bushwhacked path in the snow that I get to follow in with matriarchs in Indigenous nursing. And I'm interested to know, based on where I am right now, the unique features of Indigenous-led mentorship. Because while I do know that nursing has been aware and been trying to respond to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action, I believe that there is room for us to grow and improve and to know more about how to reconcile, how to be in good relationship. And I think that taking a more strength-based approach to mentorship and relationships, and looking at the strength that comes from the community of practice that is experienced amongst Indigenous nurses and students. I've had folks, when I used to teach up in Yellowknife at Aurora College, I remember a healthcare assistant student seeing an Indigenous fourth-year nursing student out on the floor and saying, "Who is that?" And me being, "Oh, it's so-and-so." And I said, "Oh my goodness, I've always wanted to go into nursing. And, if she can do it, maybe I can do it." And that's where the role modeling and the importance of representation, diversity, equity, inclusion is great. However, sometimes those policies and practices do fall short of being able to see yourself in that role, in the same way that I am privileged to see Lisa and to see Madeline Dion Stout and to see Jennifer Walker and so many other Indigenous nurses doing the work, and recognizing, that there are that it's been a journey, and that I'm here at this point in time in history. And so to create, to sort of poke at non-Indigenous folks to have brave and safe spaces, and then to make sure that there's a home fire for Indigenous nurses and researchers to have like a really good space to come home where it's safe as well. I think that's something of great interest to me, amongst many other things. Yeah.
Thank you. So it looks like we had 2 questions come in. One is from Shannon Field. How can we stay in the loop on the release of the protocol document? They would love to see it.
Oh, awesome. Hello, Shannon. I don't believe we've met. Where it's at right now is it's been submitted to the greater powers that be at CCNA for approval. And the plan is, we've done a very different way of doing things, but it still fit within the margins of what's required for the British Medical Journal as an open source place. We'll see if it goes there or perhaps to another place. But one thing that we did sort of differently was to have self-location in the document. And so when it is released, and if it is released, it will be released. I am confident that whether or not it's accepted in a more traditionally Eurocentric journal, then with sort of a doing things a little bit creatively differently, as per sort of authentic partnership with community nurses and whatnot, that there will be avenues for it. And so if you would like, feel free to send an email, and I will stay I'm happy to share information or to share if and when. Also, again, opportunities for engagement with other Indigenous researchers and interdisciplinary folks are also really appreciated, because we're all in it together in a sense, all of us, like collectively as a group, and stronger together too.
Wonderful. And from Charlene W., I'm sorry, I don't have her last name. As a professional practice, how is Indigenous health nursing best situated in traditional Western universities and colleges?
Excellent question. Thank you so much, Charlene. To be honest, it is not best situated within traditional Western universities and colleges. And in which case, one of the, again, promising and wise practices that I've been noting is if we can honor and respect the importance of not only having prescribed areas for Indigenous inclusion, but rather giving ownership and freedom, and allowing folks to I'm kind of losing my train of thought here. I do apologize. I would say it's important to infuse Indigenous health nursing values throughout a traditional nursing curriculum. However, there needs to be space made for Indigenous nurses to lead in the education of how those, like for example, the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action for nursing and medical schools to have a Indigenous health course requirement. Authorship of that course, I have witnessed and experienced through work with folks at UVic, for example, working alongside Leanne Kelly, Maureen Ryan, is that coming from a more strengths, resilience, rights-based view of Indigenous health and well-being is one of those promising practices that might help to shift how things are viewed, understood, and then how nurses then are prepared to situate themselves in the work, because not everyone's sort of ready. That being said as well, it is my hope that there will be space made in time for Indigenous health nursing inside as well as perhaps even outside of the traditional sort of Western institution.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? You can type it in the chat box. You can put your hand up if you have your video on, or you can put your hand up through a button through reactions in the Zoom. Looks like that's all the questions for today. Christina did share her email via the chat box to everybody. So if you wanted to follow up about the protocol document, which I'm also interested, but I already have her email, we can follow up with that. But thank you so much, Christina. Do you have any closing words for today?
Yes. Just a note that Lisa posted in the chat that the Western Indigenous Research Chairs, so there's an Indigenous, there are 6 first-time ever CIHR Indigenous Health Nursing Research Chairs. There are 3 in the East and 3 in the West. The 3 in the West, there's Lisa, and there's 2 others, and they are working on collaborating to promote Indigenous health research and working on a collaborative Indigenous health nursing master's program as well. And so that's sort of an exciting future aspirational and also hopefully action oriented thing that is going to happen. That should happen for sure.
Wonderful. Well, thank you everybody for taking the time. I'm super excited that I may meet you soon in September when UVic is back open. Thank you so much. And I'm really excited to follow up with you and learn more and have more collaboration. And just thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate for everyone who's here today. And I'm sure there will be things that I've missed or that afterwards I will have hoped to have shared. And so again, I really appreciate those who are interested in keeping the conversation going, because that I think it's closing word. I know one of my epiphanies lately has been, when it comes to truth and reconciliation, when it comes to the work of decolonizing or anti-racism or whatever label people have, they have different understandings of it. And, a lot of folks look back at how far we've come, and they're sitting in the intersection of how far we've come and how far we have to go. It's a forever journey after all. And one of the tensions and uncertainties I find is how to communicate with the team of everybody, interdisciplinary, intersectional, et cetera, with how to continue advancing forward through that intersection of where we are now and how far we've come and whatnot to how far we have to go, and sort of setting sights on the forever journey that is reconciliation. So yeah, that'd be my final note.